Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Mandell, the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer of Juniper Networks. I'm very excited to be here today, meeting with some of our Juniper ambassadors for the very first time to talk about a very timely topic, AI readiness and adoption. AI has creeped into all of our lives in some form or fashion, probably primarily through our cell phones, but or the Alexa in our house, or Google Voice, I think it is, we expect this to creep into our work lives increasingly as well. So recently, Juniper conducted a survey of 700 IT leaders from different industries. And it's clear that AI is a strategic priority, but there have been challenges with adoption and deployment as we think about bringing it into the workplace, challenges with the labor force, and how do we think about bringing these technologies into the workplace the right way. How do we find the skill sets to support them? So we wanted to talk a little bit with all of you today about your use of AI and your plans for it, and how you see these challenges manifesting in your world. So why don't I go first to Steve to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about how his company is thinking about AI currently. And then I'll make my way to everyone else joining us here today. And thank you all for being here and making time.
All right, I'm Steve Puluka. I work for DQE Communications, which is a regional service provider in the United States in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the network architect for our operations here in Western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. And we're in the process right now of evaluating and onboarding particular products for AI. So a big part of this journey right now is evaluating what products can do for us and what problems are appropriate that we might be able to apply AI to, as opposed to standard IT methodologies.
And Christian, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Christian Scholz. I'm a senior consultant working for a company called Telonic, based in Cologne, in Germany. We're also currently evaluating AI, also looking into the benefit that AI can bring, especially with stuff like root cause analysis and so forth. And very excited to be here and talk about this.
Great. And Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Jason Philp. I'm the Director of Infrastructure for Beeline. We're based in the United States, but have operations. We're using AI on sort of two fronts at this point. One from a consumer perspective, what we're looking at to optimize or sort of cover a lot of the data and information we have in the industry. And then from our application standpoint, looking to use it to track trends, that sort of thing.
Great. Well, again, thank all of you for coming in. So I'll jump into our first topic. So the research we conducted showed that one of the major challenges to adopting and deploying AI has to do with data. I think we all know data is the fuel for AI, and without it, you don't go very far. And the fact that data challenges exist aren't surprising, because there's a ton of work in the past that shows us that whether it was with traditional data analytics or big data analytics, data management has always been part of the challenge to making those things successful, and maybe most of the effort goes in there. But I wanted to ask all of you, what do you see as the key data challenges as you think about the solutions you're trying to deploy? Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I think one of the challenges is picking the right data and not only collecting just half the data, because AI will always make decisions based on that data. And if I collect that data wrong or just collect, let's say, half of the data, the decision that AI will make will also be wrong. Also, what I see is like governmental restrictions, that you're not allowed to collect certain sets of data, or you have to be very transparent with what type of data you collect. And for most of the vendors, I think that's a big problem, because depending on where you want to use AI, there are different regulatories and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the key challenges.
Absolutely. Privacy. It's often hard to disentangle the personal information that might come along with the other things you need to use. Steve or Jason, any thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, as a service provider to other people, we're very concerned about data privacy as well. So, and we maintain certifications to say that we do this, and it's a very big focus. So the data privacy aspect that Christian mentioned is an important one, and it's especially important when we're selling services that are private services as opposed to public internet services. We have to make sure that the data we're collecting, storing, and exposing to both users internally, customers externally, and the AI algorithm, particularly if the AI algorithm is not going to be running on site and that data may be leaving our thing. So that data privacy bucket is an important one. The second data issue is the perennial one. You've been running automation, you're doing monitoring, we're using data in our systems continually. So the quality of that data and the cleanup processes, because nobody uses raw data. You're doing some sort of cleanup on it so that it's preparing it for its usage. Well, this data is not only going to be used in these AI models, it's already being used in other IT systems. So we have to make sure that the cleanup processes for the various consumers of the data are compatible with each other, and if any additional things need to be done for the AI model to work. And then the third aspect of the data with AI models is this model's been trained somewhere. So I have to have a confidence that my data is similar enough to the training data that the model even works, and doesn't kick out extraneous false positive or false negative classifications or wherever else the model is doing for us. So that's an additional thing that doesn't come into play in our standard systems, where we're just monitoring and triggering and looking for things. Now we have to worry about how was that model trained, under what data was it trained, and is that data indeed a good representation of my data?
So not only does the model have to be explainable in how it makes its decisions, but we have to understand the assumptions about the data that work within it.
Right.
Yeah. Jason, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think we run into the same privacy and governance issues as everyone else. One thing that I don't think was mentioned was data location issues, right? So whether the data exists in the EMEA region or the US, we're dealing with how do we aggregate that data in a way but still maintain privacy and location-based restrictions, so we can tell, is the model going to apply globally, or does it really just apply within a state or U.S. based? So that's been a real challenge for us as well. And then sort of the regional nature of that data, is it causing things to skew in other regions which don't necessarily apply? And we've seen that sort of a lot recently with the pandemic and how countries are handling lockdowns or controls and how that affects hiring in those regions.
Well, great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing all your thoughts on that. So we spent a lot of time in that question on regulatory concerns. Internally, we have to have our own governance and kind of regulation about how we deploy these solutions inside of our companies. And the survey we did showed that 87% of execs agree that we have a responsibility to govern and minimize negative impacts of AI. Yet when we asked about the priority, these things were kind of lowest on the totem pole to address. So how do you think about what levels of governance and policies and perhaps organizational change might come into play? And when do you think there's a risk that if we don't pay close attention to that, the technology gets out ahead of us and we aren't able to make it successful because there are, negative implications of some of the early choices we've made? Jason, why don't I start with you? We'll go the other way around this time.
Sure. I'm not so sure it's not already ahead of us at this point. One of the interesting things we run into with regulatory issues is that, we have certain requirements that say things or changes within the environment need to be passed through a change control process. And in order to meet and maintain those certifications, that process has to exist. So we're not at that point where we're necessarily ready to allow something that's artificial to just go and make a change on its own. So that's been a real challenge for us. Not so much internally, because I think we're becoming more and more comfortable with allowing a system to automatically remediate itself based on the AI's recommendation. But from whether our customer or some regulatory body within the industry is also comfortable with that process, or whether or not it's going to affect their certifications negatively because we have to also fall within a compliance for them.
We've seen the same thing as we think about RPA in our financial processes, and the SOX auditors are very concerned about letting a system make a decision rather than a person. But we've been working through them, but yes, that's challenges. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I would say of all the items in the report that Juniper published, the one that surprised me the most is that this dichotomy where people say, compliance is important, but it's our lowest priority. It's like it just simply didn't make sense to me. And my experience at most of the companies I've worked for, including DQE, is that compliance is generally front and center. And it really surprised me that it was rated by such a large percentage of people as the lowest priority in an AI deliverable. And, I hope people just didn't understand the question, because it just seems wrong.
I think sometimes, the technology is new and we don't necessarily, not everybody understands it. And I think it's hard to wrap your head around policies sometimes until you've done some experimentation and understood it. And I think part of it, maybe it wasn't indicating that it wasn't important, but that it wasn't where they were spending their time yet. But yeah, it's a very interesting mix. I also think that I think the survey probably covered a broad set of industries, some much less regulated than others, and
yeah, because any new vendor, any new technology, any new thing in any company that I've worked for in the last 30 years, compliance has been one of the very first things we do, and it's foremost. It's not the last. But the survey seemed to indicate that AI, compliance and was going to be the last thing they worried about. They were going to, make the damn thing work first and worry about compliance later. Where in my personal experience, it's been really the opposite. We make sure compliance is working up front before implementation. I don't know if Jason or Christians have seen that perform differently in their organizations. This question was really confusing to me, the answer.
Most of the time, at least what I've seen with us and with our customers, is that they start relatively small, like within some sort of AI monitoring, letting AI make some decisions, but still monitoring that decisions, because it's very hard to give AI the wheel to make decisions on its own. So the trust has to be built, and I think that is still a long way to go. We're getting there, but it's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I can tell you it caught us a little bit off guard when it came to MIST, right? Our initial concerns were, where's the data going? Is it going to be kept in region? That sort of piece of the compliance. And can we consume this product and get value from it? Right? And then as it sort of advanced, we started getting a lot of value and the ability to see and sort of catch things quicker. And then we got to see its recommendations, and then it sort of progressed again to, great, these recommendations are pretty solid. Let's let it move on its own. And that's where we kind of backtracked and went, oh wait, this doesn't fit into any of our processes or controls. And we were very concerned about the data and the compliance up front, but we didn't even think of sort of that implication of where it would end up later down the road to say, okay, now it's actually going to do something and make a change. How do we address that?
Okay, so lots of challenges there, lots more work to be done. And I think that we're going to face this balance of building trust and then taking next steps and then kind of climbing a ladder around this. I find it a challenge all the time where we have a new technology, and the whole purpose of technology is to free us from the mundane so that we can move on to more sophisticated problems. But then we also have to be, willing to let the technology work. It's about making it explainable and understandable. And I think, those values and those concepts, you have to understand them from your vendors in order to take those first steps. So let's move on to readying the workforce, right? This is a big topic. And there's kind of two sides to this coin. There's preparing people who the AI technology, their jobs are going to be affected by it, whether that means certain work is no longer there for them to be done, or you're changing the nature of their work and you're calling on different skills, to the building, implementing, and deploying these solutions. So what challenges do you see with talent gaps or change management in organizations in order to properly leverage AI, and how do you see it changing the nature of our work?
Well, at first, when this whole discussion with AI started, most of the folks I've spoken to, they were like, okay, AI will take our jobs. And so far, I have not seen any robotic overlord taking over the job. The networking job is evolving. I think it's getting more and more towards a designing choice with the help of AI, with the AI giving you the necessary underlay and the necessary improvements that you could make, so you don't overlook these small things that often get overlooked while you're doing stuff. And I think it's very important to train people. We've seen a lot of companies trying to fill that gap with new people, but most of the time it's easier to train the people who are already on site, evolving them, because sooner or later the things that you work with will change. For example, with AI, a lot of the customers started learning Python. I think 10 years ago, a network engineer would have never touched Python, because why? He has a CLI and he's happy. But it's evolving. So,
Jason, how about at Beeline? What do you see happening there?
We really see it kind of as a force multiplier with Beeline. Right? It doesn't necessarily replace a person, and it hasn't, but it takes the average level person and it sort of gives them that broad expansion of visibility, where maybe they were focused primarily on one area in the past, and now the AI can sort of fill in that detailed gaps in the other locations, and it really allows them to be more effective at their level, and it's reducing things like escalations as well, right? So our frontline team that gets the calls initially is able to address and identify and pinpoint issues much quicker, and then pass them up the chain if a change actually needs to be made. It really reduces a lot of that time to response or closure that we're encountering.
And Steve?
I think one of the advantages that our team has in deploying AI as a technology group, as opposed to other types of businesses like maybe healthcare or finances, we're used to change. I'm expert in things that don't exist anymore. You have to be constantly learning and changing in this business. So it's expected that the nature of your job is going to change over the years, and AI is just the next iteration on that. So we're moving forward, and I second what Christian said too. Is a lot of the value an information technology team brings to a company is their understanding of the business and the business processes and even the nuances of that process for a particular company. So it is far, far, far better to, apply training to the existing staff, get them up to speed on whatever that new technology is, than to try to teach industry or company processes to an outsider. That's a much longer process.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I'm seeing myself, some of the companies that are most successful deploying this, really making some pretty significant investments in retraining that workforce rather than trying to find the talent. And that talent, as we all know, is pretty scarce, and being, just kind of taken straight out of university and into some kind of fairly well-known names very quickly. So it's very competitive out there. So then there's always this question of, do you build it yourself or do you buy it? And if, what are the different challenges? So, I think even some of you mentioned when we deploy these things right, we actually help our employees become more effective at what they're doing, which generally makes them happier. And, we're solving some operational challenges that we've always had. But when we're, when you're thinking about how you're going to deploy AI, is it you're building your own solutions and you're hiring data scientists and training people to work with them, or are you expecting the AI to come built in your technology? And if you are, what are the challenges with that, as these technologies have to play nice with each other? Steve, why don't you start? I seem to always go to the
Yeah.
end. So that's how you guys look on my screen. So you're
Well, at the start of any brand new enterprise like this, we're definitely on the consumer side. We're looking to pick up AI solutions that are fully baked, apply them to our business. But at the same time, for the core things that we do, we're a service provider selling a network, and we have a quite experienced and good automation team already that's doing some nice algorithms on working our services to make sure that they're up and running and deployed, and that maintenances occur and everything of that nature. So, we are starting to explore, and we're a Python shop, as Christian mentioned, So we're starting to explore, what that means in AI. There are some, Python is now one of the leading tools in using AI models in various frameworks. And, we'll be taking a look at those as well and where they fit into the things we're doing in-house and what makes sense to do in-house. But for the most part, at this early stage, we're going to be a consumer of AI provided by vendors, which means we have to evaluate it against how that vendor has set things up and how well it applies with our data and our operations.
Christian?
Yeah, it's the same for us. We're also mostly on the consumer side, because what we've seen is if you start to develop your very own AI, that's a lot of work. And most of the companies that we've seen don't have the necessary stuff to do that. So I think 99% is, we hope that the pre-built AI is doing the right thing. And maybe 1 or 2% is where we start to tweak things a little bit and try to maybe write some plugins for it. But most of the work, we're simply a consumer. So
Plugins for AI. New concept. How do you fit your model into someone else's? That's interesting thing to think about. Jason.
Yeah, I think you hit on the deciding factor for us. Really, who owns the product and sort of that key knowledge of the data set is where we tend to go for whether or not we're going to produce something locally or whether or not we're going to use a commercial product, right? So for things like network, that sort of thing, we definitely rely on the vendor product with Juniper in order to provide that for us, rather than trying to recreate that wheel and fill in those pieces where, Juniper is really the expert at their product. So with our application, we do produce our own AI to deal with a lot of the data sets that we have, because those data sets are unique to our industry, and there's not really anyone else out there creating a model like that in order to get the quality information we need. So as the owner of that sort of knowledge, I think it kind of fell on us to say, okay, we can't necessarily get a commercial product to fill in the gaps here. We're going to have to really bring that expertise in and learn and figure out how to do it ourselves.
So the model lives with the subject matter expertise and the data expertise. That's where you think it's best built.
Yeah, that's really kind of experience.
All right,
yeah,
so
I think I would amplify that too, because it's you have to ask yourself, what are you in the business of doing? And as Jason is pointing out, if the thing you're doing is core to your business, then you want to hold that more closely, and you want to be more in control, and you want to be able to more fine tune that model to your own data.
Absolutely, a principle that's applied for how you make many decisions in IT around build versus buy. So my last question, and in my last role as a CIO before coming to Juniper, I was also a consumer of the company's technology. So they asked me to come to their product management summit and help the product managers get a view of how I think. So I wrote this A Girl Can Dream speech about all the things I keep finding myself as a CIO doing over and over and over again with each new iteration of technology. And I was hoping by now the technology would get smart enough to, you know, be able to start out of the box doing some of those things. So I kind of call it a girl can dream. If you guys could dream it and it would appear in terms of an application for AI and how it would really help you in your work, particularly around the network, do you have any thoughts or ideas about that that you think we should take away as a key partner of yours?
Well, I think at some point, at least I hope if AI gets more advanced, we have some sort of sarcastic AI. So yeah, that some things like, oh, you forgot to pull that cable again, and stuff like that. That is something that I really hope to see at some point.
AI with personality.
Yes, exactly. But that would take away a little bit more of the fear, because it's like the cloud at the beginning. At first, it's just scary for the people. They don't know it yet. And yeah, the more you work with it, the less scary it gets and the more benefit you start to see. So
great. Jason?
Oh, that's a great question. I think probably one of the pieces that I'd ultimately love it to be able to track down is sort of that ghost in the machine piece of networking that we always seem to encounter. You know, we have an issue right now where we end up with symptoms. We know that doing a specific thing fixes it, but we can't for the life of us figure out what's triggering it or why it's happening. So, you know, having the AI in there with the enough knowledge and constantly keeping an eye on it, I think would be a huge benefit to us, to be able to kind of catch those sporadic things out that I can't devote a full team of people to sit there and keep eyes on glass 24/7 to try to catch one time I have random. I'd say the other wish list that I have right now is something to tie in all of the devices and such that I'm logging and fitting that data model in to let's say Juniper's patch notes and software release program knowledge base, so that it can sort of predict and identify, you know, hey, we've got this new release. How is it going to affect the network? Am I going to run into any issues by applying it, or does it fix something that it already sees affecting our network and allows us to clean something up we might not have been bothering, but may have run into? So the ability to sort of tie that piece in to our existing on-site definitely see.
Awesome. That gives me ideas for some of the data I know we have behind the scenes that we don't always share with customers.
Yep.
Well, you know, our engineers use it to try to do a better job, but maybe we figure out how to connect all those dots. Steve, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say there's two major areas for us. You know, being a network operator, you know, I would start with the obvious. You know, the ability to monitor the end-to-end services, you know, as they're exposed to the clients, so that we know when issues occur. You know, everything from you know, from the pole coming down and ripping the fiber to the more subtle packet loss type of deals, and then of course being able to respond to those and, you know, remediate, you know, work around the underlying failures and notify for permanent fixes. So, you know, that side of thing, you know, we've made a lot of progress on over the years, and I think AI is going to bring us to yet another level of those kind of detections, corrections, and permanent fixes. And then the second area is also, you know, as Jason mentioned, in the maintenance area. You know, we had some early tools and things like Juno Space, you know, the PR, you know, problem report database for Junos, and the configuration. So to be able to look at the configurations that are deployed in a network based on our Git repository, compare the deployed configurations and versions to the PR database, and say, hey, you're at risk now. This new PR has come up into the database that we didn't know about before, and you are deploying the set of features and versions that are affected, and you need to apply either this mitigation or that upgrade to clear the issues. We've had some rudimentary tools and some of the previous Juniper generations of management hardware for that, but I think AI is an opportunity to bring these to another level of interactivity for the big picture of the network, not just the individual devices and configurations.
Awesome. That last one also aligns with, there was someone who couldn't join us today, but I think in his field of dreams, it was, hey, if I've deployed something that's not best practice or the best way to use it, tell me, right? Don't let me fail. And so I think that aligns very well with the same type of concept.
Yes, as long as there's a I know and stop reminding me button, because
I just stopped working at night.
Sit down and shut up.
Yeah, right. I remember those early days of map and direction systems where, you would get off track and you made a decision and it would keep telling you, turn around, go back, turn around, go back, turn around, go back. You'd want to throw it out the window. So, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for spending time with me, giving me great, thoughtful answers to the questions so that a broader audience can benefit from your experience and your thinking. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day. And these things are always challenging when we have all these time zones. So Christian, thanks for staying up. And it's really been a pleasure meeting you, and I hope to get to talk to you all again about another interesting topic sometime soon.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.